Oh. Check, check. Yeah, we're good.
All right. God had to make sure we could, anyway, we're good.
All right. Good afternoon. I'd like to call to order the workshop of the Merced County Association of Governments. Would you please call the roll?
Director Soto? Present. Director Kale?
Here.
Director Espinoza? Director Lewis?
Here.
Director Hoag? Director McDaniel? Director Nagy?
Here.
Director Pedroso?
Here.
Director Serrato? Director Silvera?
Present.
Director Pereira?
Present.
And we do have a quorum.
Thank you. At this time, I'll ask for public comment. Is there anybody online? No? Okay, thank you. We will now move right into item 3, which is a discussion on regional homeless and housing. And we have with us today the illustrious John Checkley. Oh, what was that?
Thank you, Chairman Pereira.
You're welcome.
Good afternoon, members of the Merced County Association Government Governing Board. This is a fourth in a series of workshops that the counties come and presented on homelessness, really focused on a regional approach on homelessness and then some of the initiatives that impact all of the jurisdictions within Merced County. So appreciate the opportunity. Today we're going to continue that series. In the past, we've talked about the permanent local housing allocation where we're all eligible applicants. We've talked about our regional approach and the activities that we do countywide to help alleviate homelessness and the impacts across all the jurisdictions within Merced County. Today we're going to focus on one of those initiatives, a 100-day challenge that we participated in that was specific to Los Baños, and then our next 100-day challenge, which is something that's near and dear to all of us, and that's how can we house 100 children in 100 days, and then how can we partner more closely to do that in the impact of families experiencing homelessness across all of our jurisdictions. If I could get the PowerPoint, please. Thank you. All right, so here's an overview. We will review the Los Baños Encampment Challenge. The governor's established a 100-day challenge with a very specific methodology of how communities can come together across multiple sectors to tackle some of the homelessness being experienced. This particular challenge was focused on encampments, and we, pardon me. Can you go back? Thank you. We chose Los Baños for that particular challenge because of the opportunity to make an impact on the west side of the county, and historically what we were considering underserved. We'll discuss our next challenge, which is 100 children in 100 days, and we presented here on the point in time count. We didn't really have a good analysis at the time. It's really just a report without much analysis. So we've had an opportunity to look at that a little more closely, and we're going to talk a little bit about what may be driving the increase in families who are experiencing homelessness, and then some opportunities and possible next steps where we can further collaborate on addressing homelessness amongst families. Thank you. So the challenge in Los Baños, it was to target encampments. We chose that very deliberately. In the 6 months prior in our homeless management information system, we had shown two individuals being housed in Los Baños. Obviously, we wanted to increase that. So part of the challenge when you bring a system leader cohort together was to quote unquote establish an audacious goal. Right? And that audacious goal was to house 20 individuals in safe and stable housing, as well as placing 25 individuals on a pathway to safe and stable housing. As a result of the 100-day challenge, we were able to house 20 individuals, And some of the stakeholders involved in this included what you would traditionally anticipate: community-based organizations, the county, our outreach and engagement center. But we deliberately engaged with the City of Los Banos Police Department, getting their code enforcement involved, folks who are boots on the ground, engaging with Sutter Memorial Hospital. Joy Castro was one of the system leaders in this challenge, and was a participant in it. So to see those types of results, we've targeted folks who are over 50, and 16 of the 20 that we housed were individuals who were over 50. So again, we did this challenge with 4 other jurisdictions, including San Bernardino, Sacramento, Fresno, and Santa Cruz. I would just say that we excelled. We really got a lot of positive feedback from the state, and showed that when communities come together with a cross-sector collaborative approach, really focused, it was time-consuming, but it was meaningful in the fact that we can have these results. On the next slide. Here's what we found that made this challenge a success: data integrity. We've known for a long time that if you can't prove something through data, it doesn't exist. So when we looked at the prior 6 months and we had 2 individuals who were housed, none of us believed that to be true, but that's all we could prove. So that's the truth, right? There were 2 folks who were housed. As part of this, we really set up a proper data collection in our homeless management information system, and that was possible through funding provided by the Continuum of Care for Data Integrity, where prior to this challenge and prior to last year, the coordinated entry system component of our homeless management information system was being facilitated by the county. That really consisted of probably 2 hours a day, or 2 hours a week, excuse me, being able to help facilitate that type of data and coordination and referrals and follow-up. The Continuum of Care funded the Community Action Agency to hire a full-time data manager, and that full-time data manager was integral. So that identified data lead position in creating the challenge within our homeless management information system and then tracking that data. And we found that to be really motivational when you're asking a question every week when we were checking in, to be able to validate who was being served, creation of a by name list, et cetera. And then creating a broad partnership in general in the county through our Continuum of Care. We already have a broad partnership established. The mayor of Merced is the Continuum of Care chairman. We have Steve Tejan, the superintendent of county schools. We have Jennifer Mockus from our managed care plan provider. We have Supervisor Pedroso from our board of supervisors. We have Chief Gary Breezy. So we have a broad partnership. This just really solidified that within the city of Los Banos, the community of homeless service provider, government and private sector partners coming together, and then challenging traditional roles. Traditionally, law enforcement, it's in the name, right? Enforcement. In this case, they were much more looking to provide services and connections and redefine what law enforcement role was going to be during the delivery of services. Some of the lessons that we learned in validation of existing efforts, we engaged more meaningful with people with lived experience. So actually, folks who are currently experiencing homelessness and talking to them about, what types of services they need. We got feedback from them, their loss of hope. They felt like they're invisible, basically. We talked to them at one point about racial equity, and it was interesting. The gentleman pushed back and said, we're our own class of people within your communities, and that's how we feel and perceive that we're viewed. And then just restoring that identity. A lot of us have our identity tied up in where we work, family members, that's our identity. These individuals have lost that, and trying to help restore that. We were able to reconnect several folks with their family networks and provide some social supports for them. We actually were able to get 23 employed during the course of the challenge. And now we're in a sustainment phase. So that number through April 14th was 23. Today it's 33. And part of these challenges and the methodology behind it is you basically try some stuff out, see what works, make adjustments, and then sustain that. So we still have weekly meetings and we're still seeing great outcomes. We had housed 20 individuals. Today that's 29. So those efforts still continue. And the purpose of the challenge is there a way to do business that's a little different than how we're doing it now? If that's working, don't stop. And we've served over 192 duplicated individuals who have come through the challenge. The challenge itself also validated the role of emergency shelter. It's hugely expensive. and we have a non-congregate shelter in Los Baños with about 25 beds, and it probably costs about $1 million every 6 months. And is that how do you justify that expense? It was funded through Emergency Solution Grant coronavirus funding. It really did make an impact in Los Baños, talking to the chief of police and just the community in general, being able to move folks from the encampments into this non-congregate shelter and then house them. You provide for some of their basic needs. That investment was further validated through a partnership with the city of Los Baños, where they contribute $200,000 of their ARPA funding, with the county, where we also contributed $200,000. That project was set to end on June 30th and now has been extended to October 31st, just to continue to sustain this challenge. We also saw the Continuum of Care invest $200,000 in distributive homes. That's the rental of a single family home. They invested $200,000 to continue that through March of 2024. So again, there's a real pivotal role that emergency shelter plays. It's very difficult to work with people in encampments. There's too many threats to their survival and safety. By stabilizing them in some type of emergency shelter, we're able to get documents ready, have meaningful conversations about where folks need to go, what their barriers are, and then connect them to resources. And then probably the best thing that came out of this was the multidisciplinary approach with private-public partnerships, our community-based organizations, working with our governmental organizations in order to address this kind of in lockstep. So there wasn't a conflicting role where law enforcement's going to be moving folks around encampments. It was really, hey, how can we work together in order to serve this population? Next slide. So that was the governor's 100-day challenge focused on encampments in Los Baños. As a community, as a continuum of care, and as service providers, we were obviously looking to replicate that. How can we do our next challenge, follow the same methodology, bring folks together, set audacious goals, and then coordinate to meet those goals? So even before we had an opportunity to get into the governor's next 100-day challenge, we were going to go right ahead, and we were going to focus on children and families. Part of that, it became really apparent looking at our point-in-time count over the last few months. In 2020, we had 80 individuals that were in motels that were members of a family. In 2021, that went up to 155 individuals, members of a family with dependent-age children that were in motels. In 2022, that number was now up to 216. So from 2020, pre-COVID, because the count happens in January, we're at 80. In 2022, we're at 216 individuals from families in motel vouchers. And that's just in the Human Service Agency program, the Housing Support Program. Overall, we did talk last time about the 19% reduction in unsheltered homelessness, again, a component of our public space management strategy, and the increase in emergency shelter that you've seen over the last couple years, most notably last year. So there was a 19% reduction in folks who are living unsheltered, but a 2% overall increase. If we could have just held steady with our 2021 numbers, there would have been a 41% decrease, or 4.9% overall. Recently, just this morning, actually, there was the first 28 continuums of cares published. 18 of them showed an increase in their point-in-time counts, and 10 of them showed a reduction. Obviously, our goal is to get in that reduction spot. So we're hopeful next year with some of the home key projects that you're seeing, and then with this focus on children and family, that we could help reduce that number. And one of the things we looked at were families' last permanent zip code, and really the reason that I bring it up here in front of this body and organization, all of our jurisdictions are represented here in some form or another. Whether it's Gustine with one family who's in an HSA program, their last permanent zip code was in Gustine. Livingston, Los Baños, Dos Palos, obviously Merced. 2/3 of the numbers during our important time counts are represented in the city of Merced and the city of Los Baños. I think when we take families as a snapshot in a subpopulation we're really earnest to serve, we wanted to reflect that this is something that is really countywide, to the theme that I opened with, like how can we partner, and what information are we going to bring you? This is one example of it, an example that's driving the increase in our overall homeless population. We go to the next slide, please. So why do we see this increase in families? We do some analysis of these numbers. One of the reasons is affordability. I don't think it's a surprise to anyone here that affordability has become a really big barrier to our families finding affordable housing. We use the fair market rent. It's published by Housing and Urban Development. It also determines the maximum rental assistance a Section 8 or a housing choice voucher can provide to a family. So we use fair market rent. One of our strategies is to pair our families who have very minimal income with a Section 8 or housing choice voucher so they can sustain their household. In our housing support program, and if you look at the county overall, there's about 16% of households who are at the federal poverty level. So that is roughly 13,500 families within our county. About 5,252, the last time we pulled numbers, were in our CalWorks program. So those are families that are income restricted with some type of dependent age child and a deprivation. And then we further whittle that down to our housing support program, which are 400 of the most vulnerable families amongst our 5,000 CalWorks recipients. So we're speculating somewhat, but I think it's a pretty strong correlation that over the last 3 years, we've seen over 30% increase in rents from studios to 4-bedroom apartments. We also brought the HUD fair market rent to everyone's awareness. We did have some information from Zumper.com that shows that even over the last year, based on rental apartments that are available or housing that's available for rent that they put on their site, we're seeing again about a 25% increase this year. Some of that has to do with eviction moratoriums, supply and demand, multiple factors, market factors that we're all fairly aware of. So that's one of the reasons we chose the families and children for our next challenge. It's also the reason we're working so closely with the Housing Authority. It's also the reason we come before you and talk about permanent local housing allocation and affordable housing development. I believe you all have a RENA presentation later to talk about the needs for moderate and low income housing within our communities. And this isn't unique to our community. It's really across all of California. So these are the stats. This is what's driving us. This is why we've chosen this next particular challenge. And if we go to the last slide, kind of the opportunities that these present. We're better together. The county can't do this on its own. We really partner with our continuum of care, our jurisdictional partners, our community-based organizations. There's certain ways jurisdictions can get involved, such as assisting with landlord recruitment. During the Los Banos Challenge, we went to service clubs and provided presentations at those service clubs. No one knows their local area better than everyone who resides within those local areas. Participation with our communication plan. We had our first meeting on our 100-day challenge to house 100 children today. Identifying the various organizations within your jurisdictions that could potentially help us with that. There'll be press conferences and press releases, and if you're inclined to participate with that, that would be another great opportunity. As well as we'll be having weekly meetings with the stakeholders who are going to be addressing this particular challenge. And then lastly, considering how we can leverage our resources to set aside units in future affordable housing developments for homeless families. I talked to Chris Alley with I think it's Central Valley Housing Opportunity Coalition, and I'm certain I did not say that correctly. It was interesting. Childs and B has 30 units that have been set aside for individuals and families who are high utilizers of healthcare, emergency departments, et cetera. That's in coordination with our managed care plan. And overall, if you look at that affordable housing complex, there's 119 units. They still have requirements, and some of those requirements include 2.5 times the income to rent, or credit scores, or evictions not being on your record. with those 30 units, because of how they were funded through the managed care plan provider, they're able to lower some of those restrictions to basically, if you have enough funding to show you can provide for the utilities and your food expenses, you don't need 2.5 times the income to rent. You know, they've obviously lowered that standard. They're able to do that because those 30 units have been partnered with emergency housing vouchers. So the developer, who's a business, doesn't have to worry about, well, how am I going to pay my bills? So we developed that relationship with the housing authority to pair these units with those vouchers in order. She's the one who suggested that as a strategy, and it's not a simple strategy for any of us to execute. But again, I wanted to come and provide that information to this group as a possible, again, meaning for us to partner. That's really all I have, Mr. Chair. Pending any questions, I appreciate, again, the continued quarterly opportunities. And if there's any topics or subjects that this board of directors would like to see, please send that over to me.
Okay, any questions of John? Nope, seeing none, so thank you. Oh, yes?
I didn't know that. I thought we had to press the button here.
Yeah, you're good. If your square's green, you're on.
Thank you very much. John, I'm filling in for our mayor, so that, you know, this topic may have been, the question may have been asked, so please forgive me if it has been. Of course, we have the Project Room Key in Los Banos, which is, you know, one of the programs that you're working with. When the money runs out for these programs, is there another source that your organization is going to be able to tap in order to keep these people housed and try to help them get and stay on their feet and perhaps find jobs and other housing?
And that's really one of the big challenges of my position and my team's job. I think in September we had talked about bringing some of the proposals from the governor and state assembly and Senate on what does the $500 million for encampments, who can apply for it, what can it pay for. We are actively searching for funding to continue all of these projects. Unfortunately, all of them have been hugely benefited by an influx of funding from COVID stimulus funding. So Emergency Solution Grant Coronavirus, which was the $1 million allocation that first established that, we received about 20 times what we would historically receive annually during that one allocation for Emergency Solution Grant Coronavirus. That's one of the things I've asked my team to look at and monitor closely from a legislative information officer standpoint. Once this budget is finalized, what funding has been compromised for and made available, what can it be used for? One of the things we're trying to develop is a 1, 3, and 5-year plan to continue as many of these programs as long as we can. The short answer is there isn't any identified funding for a lot of these projects. It's one-time funding that we're continually trying to extend contracts and manage, but it's definitely a priority. You can bring that back to your mayor. It's a priority. It's on our team's list. We talked to the chief of police the other day about that. We'll be scouring everything that's available.
And you know, I'm just sitting here pulling it out of the top of my head. I would think with the success of this program, that it could be a good example to the state of California, and with all the surplus money that's up there at the state level, it might be worthwhile for the state to look at this, since the previous governor had a challenge of how, you know, ending homelessness, by 2030. You know, it's just something I'm pulling off the top of my head, that, and I'm sure you guys have already thought of that and working on it to make sure that not only our local representatives, but you know, other representatives throughout the state can see the success of this program and consider releasing more money to help local municipalities out to be able to sustain what they're doing.
And the governor and the state's been really, I guess the word of the day is accountability. They're very focused on accountability. They've released since 2018 billions of dollars for housing and homelessness, and in furtherance of that, they've had us submit a very detailed plan for our next round of funding, which we'll be applying for June 30th. I don't know what the legislation is going to look like when the budget is finally passed. One, you know, very, very cautious about how quickly they're able to get standard agreements out. But again, it's one of the priorities within our community. It's been hugely successful. The feedback we've gotten from the technical assistance folks and from the state itself, you know, we did a good job. Are they going to give us some kind of direct allocation? I don't know.
Thank you very much.
And just, again, in addition to that, we talked about how expensive emergency shelter is. In our navigation center, for example, it's about $66 a day for a bed. In our home key projects, obviously it's partner, say ours, it's our community, our county, our jurisdictional partners, that number is closer to $25 a bed day, right? And permanent housing there's more resources for it than emergency shelter. We can look at emergency housing vouchers, rapid rehousing money through emergency solution grants, and some of the other one-time funding. The emergency shelter is so expensive that when you talk and bring up the viability of continuing this in the long term, it's very difficult. I can add emergency solution grant coronavirus funding. We have requested 2.3 million additional dollars, excuse me. And one of the projects we would look to prioritize would be Los Baños if we were awarded that. The state of California had till June 1st to reach a 50% expenditure. The state overall did reach that 50% expenditure. Our county's at 60%. So it does open us up for the additional funding. What we've heard from Housing and Community Development in the state is we needed to focus on getting to that 50% expenditure rate so the feds didn't claw back any of that money. Now that we're there, we'll work on, hey, where do we reallocate and allocate this towards? That's probably the best solution to your question, is if we can get additional emergency solution grant coronavirus funding.
All right, thank you, John. Is that a question?
Just one quick comment, John. If you talk, I think it's called the Permanent Local Housing Assistance, and talk about how each jurisdiction has an allocation. That you have to apply for it, but there's already a dollar amount that's set aside, and I think that's where all the local jurisdictions get on board so that we can all be part of the solution. The county can apply for money that needs to be distributed throughout the whole county, but also the local jurisdictions can apply for their share of money. Am I correct?
Yes, you are.
Okay. I just want to highlight that for all the local jurisdictions, especially the non-entitlement cities. But you have to apply for that. And I know I can speak, that like with the city of Los Baños, when we met with them on the 200,000 that they put in, they obviously don't have a lot of the technical part of it. We can't do it for them, but we're willing to offer to help them with that technical piece on how you get it. And all that does is just bring more money to the table that can extend these programs even longer.
That is correct. There's a non-competitive portion that each jurisdiction that we've talked about. There's also a competitive portion for the non-entitlement jurisdictions, and that's up to $5 million for housing projects or $1 million for services. That NOFA was supposed to be released last month, and I did not see it get released, so it's clearly delayed and the state's busy. I would point out the home key project that the city of Merced applied for, where they're going to get 90 units. This is a good example. 45 of those units are going to be paid for by the continuum of care in agreement with the developer and operator. We're getting 45 units for 2 years at just under $2 million. So to put it in broader context, we're getting 25 beds at the motel for 6 months at about $1 million versus 45 permanent supportive housing units through Home Key. It's probably the best program I've seen. It also is paying all of the capital expenditure for that. So the developer is able to purchase that motel outright and convert 45 of those units into single room occupancy. So there's a good opportunity there. And I know we've spoken to the City of Los Baños leadership about that. Again, from a technical assistance standpoint, we do stand ready to help out with any questions that you have.
All right. We're good. Thank you, John.
Sir, thank you. Thank you, sir.
Okay, all right. Okay, well, welcome to the regular meeting of the Merced County Association of Governments. We will call the meeting to order at 3:02. Joy, would you please call the roll?
Director Soto,
Present.
Director Espinoza, Director Kale,
Here.
Director Lewis,
Here.
Director Hope,
Here.
Director McDaniel, Director Nagy,
Here.
Director Pedroso,
Here.
Director Serrato,
Here.
Director Silvera,
Present.
Chair Pereira.
Present.
Thank you, and we do have a quorum.
All right, thank you for that. At this time, we'll have item 4B, which is our invocation. Is there anybody that would like to provide an invocation? You know, Eric jumps up every time, but if somebody else would like to, I'm sure he would yield. Nope, okay.
Please bow your head. Heavenly Father, Father God, we just love you and we praise you and we thank you, Father, for this day. And Father, we just pray for the efforts that John is doing and the electeds are doing to bring more resources and opportunity and beds to our community. And Lord Jesus, we just invite you into this building, this place. This people invite you all over this county, both east and west. And Father, I just ask that you would strengthen the staff that is here to present. Give discernment to the leaders and the electeds that are here to make decisions on behalf of the residents. And we just praise you in Yeshua's Jesus' name. Amen.
Thank you to both Eric and Joy. We'll move to item 5, approval of the agenda.
Chair Silvera, motion to approve.
Okay.
Second.
All right, been moved by Director Silvera, seconded by Director Pedroso. Is there any public comment? Seeing none, will you please call the roll?
Director Soto,
Yes.
Director Kale,
Here.
Can't we do it?
Director Lewis,
Yes.
Director Hope,
Okay.
Yes.
Director Nagy,
Aye.
Director Pedroso,
Yes.
Director Serrato,
Yes.
Director Silvera,
Aye.
Chair Pereira.
Aye.
Thank you. Motion carries unanimously.
All right. We will now move to public comment. Public comment is available in advance of or during the meeting. If you are interested in making public comment, you would have 3 minutes. And please come to the podium. All right, no public comment. If you are trying to watch the Zoom meeting, and of course we're struggling with that, you're more than welcome to call in. Joy, could you please give us the number that they would call? Or does
The
anybody?
audio option is 1-669-900-6833, and the corrected meeting ID number is 875-5582-0190.
Thank you, Joy. We'll now have the Caltrans report. Well, hi, Marlon.
Chair, good afternoon. Director, good afternoon, and to the board, good afternoon. Just want to provide some quick updates regarding Caltrans. I will start with the federal, excuse me, I should start with the workers memorial update. This past month we had our Caltrans Workers Memorial, but we recently were made aware that we had a Caltrans landscape maintenance worker that had passed away and was hit on Interstate 80 near Vacaville. We wanted to mention this because our Caltrans acting director has put out a statement regarding this. It is a tragedy, and it's I'll just read verbatim from his words, but this tragedy is particularly painful coming so close to our workers' memorial service just a little over a month ago, and it really drives home how dangerous our work on California's roadways can be. Our focus on safety and the move over law and asking the public to increase their awareness of the people working on the highways on their behalf are part of our continued effort to eliminate these tragic incidents. So I just wanted to share the words from our Caltrans acting director, Stephen Keck. This is something that we very much are highlighting, Caltrans worker safety, and it's just another reminder, if you're out and about on the roadways, please do be mindful of those doing work alongside of our roadways and being safe as possible, and we really appreciate that. Other words, I do also have some other things to mention for the board today. One of them regarding our federal Reconnecting Communities pilot program. This is a federal program, actually, but we would like to call for project nominations. And so there is $145 million available in capital construction grants for this Reconnecting Communities program, and also $50 million available in planning funds for this program. This is something that Caltrans is very much interested in terms of applying and also partnering with our local and regional agencies. So if there's any interest on your end, please do reach out to us. We'd be happy to discuss how we can partner or support any applications coming from Merced County. This call for nominations is due on June 30th. So not that long, but we are very much interested in any partnerships possible with Merced County, MCAG, or any of the partner agencies. Please do reach out. I do also want to just quickly mention, I know we had some actions that the board had requested from last time around, but before I get to that, I do also want to mention, because it came out earlier today, another federal program, Federal Safe Streets and Roads for All. That's another program that has been released through the bipartisan infrastructure bill federally, and we're anticipating that this program will have $5 billion over the next 5 years, and this is going to fund regional, local, and tribal initiatives to prevent roadway deaths and serious injuries, with up to $1 billion available this year in 2022. So this is something where a state's not an eligible applicant, so Caltrans will not be applying for this Safe Streets and Roads for All program. But we did want to share this for our partners as well. If there's any interest, we are happy to support or provide any letters of support for this program. So please do reach out if you'd like further information on this program, and if you'd like to partner or receive support from Caltrans on this. Lastly, as I mentioned, I wanted to provide an update on some of the action items requested last month from the board, in particular regarding, State Route 33 in Gustine. I know, Mr. Chair, you had requested consideration of hawk signals. That's something that we're open to discussing further. I would request, if you'd like to have a follow-up meeting to discuss the areas in particular you'd like to see a hawk system. We'd definitely love to talk about that further. There was a request also on Route 59 near Snelling Road, which you had mentioned previously. Our maintenance team has noted that they went out just west of Snelling Road to take a look at the shoulders and make some improvements. But if you don't see those improvements to your satisfaction, please do follow up with us. we really want to make sure we're getting towards the exact locations that you mentioned previously. Also, we do plan to meet with the county separately to discuss Route 59 intersections south of the city of Merced and on specifically Girard Avenue and the other adjacent intersections as well. And the Mariposa Creek Bridge at Route 59, we just received word that our construction team is anticipating that we will be able to start construction in 2024, and it seems to be in the fall of 2024. We had just recently finalized our environmental phase for this project. It is a bridge replacement project, and we're going to be beginning our design, our project delivery very shortly, probably later on this year. So just wanted to provide a quick update on that as well. And I think that was the updates that I had to share. So that concludes my updates. I'm happy to take any questions, thoughts, and concerns. Thanks again for the time.
Okay, first, on the 33, Highway 33 in Gustine, Director, May Nagy is here, so I'll work with him and we'll put together some dates to put together a meeting. That'll work? Okay. All right, and then, so the maintenance crew has been out. They've been east of Snelling. They were out there earlier this week and doing work, so I'll keep an eye on things as they unfold. And then I want to bring up another situation. I had a constituent call me. So if you're on V Street and you're headed south, you cross under the 99, and then you have the intersection there of Highway 140 and 13th Street. So if you're either on V Street or if you're on 15th Street. Is that right? 15th? No, 14th Street. So that's 13th. So the intersection is 13th and Highway 140. That traffic builds up underneath the freeway, and so a constituent brought up to my attention that when traffic is going east on Highway 140, that a right turn arrow could be on that would allow that traffic to continue out going west. And so just wanted to raise that up. I talked to our vendor yesterday, and I should have shared it with him, but I didn't. So anyways, any of my other colleagues have items? Okay.
Yeah, Marlon, just want to highlight for you, I know that when you guys did your traffic study for Highway 33 and Centinela Boulevard, you guys didn't find any need for a right-hand turn lane there, but I just wanted to highlight for you that I know that the county, as part of our West Side Projects Measure V committee, did commit to $100,000, and I believe I saw it on an agenda that we actually approved with MCAG. So we're moving forward on that PSR. So I just want to keep that in the forefront as we do the front end work. You know, if for some reason you find some of these extra billions that they have laying around in Sacramento, that, you know, we're just asking for what I think should probably cost a couple $100,000, but it's probably going to cost $1 million. But don't forget about us over there in Centinela, that we're really looking for that right-hand turn lane on Centinela Boulevard. And we're actually kind of putting some money into it to kind of spur you guys to be able to find some dollars, and we'll have hopefully it won't take too long to study that. We'll have a shovel-ready project for you to put some dollars to work.
Thank you. Any other directors? Nope. Stacy?
There we go. Hi, Marlon. Just this morning, and I'm sorry I wasn't able to get you a heads up on this one before the meeting, but just this morning we met with the City of Merced, reviewing a handful of CMAQ projects, and I just want to get an early heads up on our radar that there are 2 projects at Highway 59 and 16th Street that we're going to be moving in, or we're starting a critical timeline to make sure that we're able to utilize those CMAQ dollars now through December. And so I know we've worked on similar situations like this in the past, and as I was talking with the city manager this morning, we realized let's start this conversation with Caltrans sooner rather than later so that we can, have an excellent partnership over the next few months as these projects progress. They do have, as I mentioned, our CMAC dollars to the projects, and they're also, the funds are a local match to the investments to support the ACES MITSI project. So there's a lot of components here that we want to make sure we're well ahead of any timeline crunch, but they will be moving forward at risk between now and December with those construction dollars from CMAQ. So just wanted to get those on your radar on behalf of the City of Merced, and we'll add that to our check-in moving forward.
Okay, Marlon, I see no other questions or comments, so thank you for your time. We sure appreciate it.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
All right, you're welcome. We'll move to item 8, which is our Citizens Advisory Committee report. And we have in the house Shane Smith. Hi, Shane.
Hello, everybody. I assure you there are other members of the committee besides me. Last week I was covering, and this is my regular turn. I'll do what I can to get a fresh face for you next month. And Director Silvera, good to see you on the mend. You guys have seen the highlights, as I do, just kind of the sense of the committee. 3 items to bring to your attention. Number 1, a lot of discussion. The committee recommends approval of the transit route schedule and service revisions. There was real kudos for staff in identifying unmet transit needs that are reasonable to be addressed, and 3 really stood out there. Number 1, partnering with the City of Merced to buy a new bus to improve transit to the county's rescue mission, and also the new affordable housing project at Childs and B Street. So thumbs up from the citizens on that one. Also, and I don't know who thinks about these things in such a spatial way, but restructuring the route through Planada to reduce the transit time from Merced, aka Jobs, back to Planada. So 2 thumbs up on that one too. And then also extending the bus route down M Street to its new terminus out by the high school. Seems like a no-brainer, right? If we're going to build houses out there, might as well get some bus traffic. I got to tell you, just speaking for myself, probably the most likely place to have a new MCSD elementary school is at Arrowwood and M. So maybe we're building some ridership there for the future. Also, support for approving the other programs budget, the mysteriously named other programs budget. The point from the committee was appreciating the transparency. These are the kind of value added, not really tied to any program kind of stuff that usually sits in budgets and nobody knows what's being spent on it. So there was high marks for this group for wanting to see these extra programs highlighted and not just buried in page 53 of a 150-page document. And then just generally, as often happens in my Citizens Advisory Committee, just wanting to promote authentically engaging with the ridership in ways and in languages that our riders can access and the platforms that they use. So just kind of keep that in mind as you govern this important body. So with that, those are my thoughts. Any questions?
Any questions of Shane? I would just like to mention that with the changes in the haircut, you kind of seem like a new person each time.
Oh, good. I'm debating if I should go shorter or keep it kind of this middle length. So,
yeah, I'm no good to ask that one.
yeah,
So.
I'll have an update for you guys the next time I see you. How about that?
All right, thank you, and
All right,
thanks
thank
for
you,
your
buddy.
time.
Have a good
Appreciate
meeting.
you coming
Appreciate
down.
Thanks, Shane.
Okay, we'll move to item 9, which is election of chair and vice chair for fiscal year 22-23, and I'll turn it over to our Executive Director, Stacy Guzman.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Each June, the MCAG Governing Board elects a chairperson and a vice chairperson to serve a 1-year term that coincides with the fiscal year, so beginning July 1 and ending June 30. The agency's governing policies require that the chair and vice chair alternate between a member of the County of Merced Board of Supervisors and a representative from one of the 6 city member agencies. In June of 2017, the governing board adopted a a chair rotation policy or a schedule that, based on those requirements I mentioned that were included in our governing policies, it also took into consideration the history of the chairman or chairperson position over the years to essentially ensure that there was some consideration of jurisdictional rotation among the cities in particular. So the requested action today, and also before I say that, on page, let's see, what page 14, is that correct? Yeah, 14 of the packet is that rotation schedule showing the history. And as you can see, it indicates that the chair for the coming fiscal year would be from the city of Merced, and that the vice chair would be a supervisor from the county of Merced. So the requested action today is to elect Vice Chair Matt Serrato from the city of Merced to serve as the chairperson for a one-year term commencing July 1, 2022 and ending June 30, 2023. And then to entertain a nomination and an election of a director from the county to serve as the vice chairperson for the same term.
All right, thank you. Well, I guess let's do chair first. And is there a nomination from the board?
I would like to nominate Director Serrato as chairman. And the best thing about it is that he'll probably be on time.
Don't hold your breath.
He's going to miss his box seats to the meeting, but is there a second?
I'll second.
Okay, so we have a motion by Director Nagy and a second by Director Pedroso. Any public comment? Any online? Seeing none, I'll close public comment and I'll bring it back. All those in favor signify by saying aye. 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 Any opposed? All right, well, congratulations, Mayor.
You know I had all the votes on that side of the desk because we're all laughing at me right at this point. They were all yes votes.
All right, and then we'll move to the office of Vice Chair. Are there any nominations for Vice Chair?
No, I don't want to nominate myself. If we follow the rotation, District 5 would be up next, but seeing as how we skipped over District 2 the last time, I guess one Supervisor Laura was here, not here, whatever. So I would nominate my colleague from District 2 to serve as the Vice Chair.
Okay.
It would be.
Is there a second?
I'll second.
All right, so we have a motion by Director Silvera and a second by Director Nagy. Any public comment? Any online? I see no public comment. So we'll call for the vote. All those in favor signify by saying aye. 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 Any opposed? Hey, congratulations. Motion carries unanimously. All right. We will move to, you need anything else on that, Director?
Thank you.
All right, we'll move to item 10, which is our informational items. All this information was in your packet. If you have any questions, we could take them at this time. I see no questions. So we'll move on to item 11, which is our consent calendar agenda. What's the pleasure of the board? Okay, items die for,
Move to approve consent calendar as stated.
all right.
Items die 'cause everybody's too shy.
Is that a second?
I'll second.
All right. So we have a motion by Director Nagy and a second by Director Serrato. Do we have any public comment at this time? Any online? None online. I will close public comment. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Any opposed? Same sign. Motion carries unanimously. Okay, we'll move to item 12, which is our transit JPA for Merced County. We do have action item 12A, which is approve the transit route schedule and service revisions as recommended by staff and our Citizens Advisory Committee. Christina, it's all yours. Or Christine, sorry.
Good evening, good afternoon, Mr. Chair and directors. Nice to see you all. I have a quick PowerPoint to go through some of the recommended schedule and service revisions that we're planning with your approval to be implemented on August 13th of 2022. That's a Saturday. So the requested action is to recommend and approve the route, schedule, and service revisions and direct staff to conduct a Title VI compliant outreach and public hearing prior to service implementation. The changes would consist of modifications that will address and satisfy outstanding unmet transit needs. You guys know we've talked about this over the past about 3 years, that we've been unable to implement this, and with the short-range transit plan coming to a close, we've gotten some pretty clear direction as to how we can implement those successfully. They would also make permanent the emergency service reductions that we implemented in October of 2021 and begin the implementation of the short-range transit plan recommendations to new service areas. So the details of them, the unmet transit needs that were outstanding are the unmet transit needs in North Merced. That's providing service north of the college and providing additional services to Planada. Right now they have a pretty scarce schedule. I think they have about 4 runs in a day, so this would provide a lot more consistent schedule. Addressing unmet transit needs to increase service to Planada. This is going from 6 daily trips to 10, and streamlining the short-range transit plan recommendations to provide service to the Felix Torres stop on demand from 8 to 5. They have a gate that closes and opens only during the hours of 8 to 5, so it's difficult to make that a part of the schedule when the bus wouldn't be able to get in there and turn around. So that would be an on-demand stop between 8 and 5. And modifying parts of the route for safety and ridership purposes to make a few more right turns rather than lefts through Planada and La Grande. And so here's a map of what that change will look like, or what we're recommending. And then also in the short-range transit plan, we had a lot more recommendations for bi-directional travel rather than loop travel. So if you're standing at a stop, you can basically get dropped off across the street rather than 2 streets over. And so you'll see a lot of those recommendations in short-range transit plan. So this would be the start of the implementation of that. And so within Planada itself and La Grande, we're changing the direction of travel to make more rights than lefts, and to provide service to more of the populated areas with new housing developments and just changes in housing patterns or living. This would also address the unmet transit needs in North Merced. So the M4 route is what currently provides that service, and right now it provides service from South Merced to North Merced along M Street. And so this would, this change that we're proposing would split it into 2 different routes. So we would keep the M4 route for North Merced, splitting it at the Transpo. So from the Transportation Center on 16th Street and O, we would travel north, and then we'd have a separate bus traveling south. And I'll get into the difference in the number of vehicles that we will be using for these 2 runs in just a minute. We would provide service to North Merced past the college, which is satisfying the unmet need. And we will service Merced's new North Transit Hub near M Street and Bellevue Road. That's anticipated for completion, I think, in the fall. Don't quote me on the date, but it's sometime in September. Matt may know more than me. Yeah, sounds great. And then in the M7 in Southeast Merced would provide service to the Bean Childs Avenue Affordable Housing Project. That's well under construction. We may have some temporary deviations just because of the road closures on B Street and Childs Avenue while they're doing all the curb and sidewalk, but from what I understand is currently under development. And we would also be providing service to the G Street Cone Avenue Rescue Mission, which right now we're traveling down G Street and we have a stop near the intersection. But this would be like storefront or curbside to the rescue mission, so people can catch the bus there and travel back to the Transpo or wherever along the M4 route, or M7 route, sorry. We'd update the schedule, and then we would eliminate flag stops when feasible. And that's part of a grander recommendation within the short-range transit plan. Flag stops are essentially where there's not a pole and you're standing somewhere along the path of travel of the bus, and you just kind of wave at the bus and they stop and pull you over. As you can imagine, it's pretty unsafe, especially on high-speed roads. But the short-range transit plan recommended that we start eliminating those in urban areas, and so we thought we would start with these. We are working with each of the jurisdictions to implement agreements with them for all of our bus stops because we are not the jurisdictions. We don't have any jurisdiction over their land, and so we want to make sure that the terms of bus stops are clearly spelled out. And so Short Range Transit Plan has drafted agreements for us to do that. And so I don't know that that will be implemented initially, but we will have a goal of it and implement those as soon as we can. And then there's also, you know, the factor of having the riders learn the new terms of riding. So, and then the M4, so here's a map of the routes I just described. The red line you see on the second map is where the M4 would become the north route, M4, and then below it would be the M7 route. And so the service reductions, we implemented these in October of 2021. This was in response to the driver shortage, you know, lack of vehicles, and just these were the lower hanging fruit that had the lowest ridership. So the W2, also known as the Winton Commuter North, this route travels through Merced College, the Target and Walmart in Merced, the Franklin area, and into Winton via Bellevue. This is going to be absorbed by portions of the L route, so the L route would then travel into Castle and provide the services that the W2 used to provide that the L route does not. And so this is what we've been running since October 2021. We haven't had very many complaints about them. I think the biggest was arriving at Castle HSA closer to 8 o'clock, before 8 o'clock, because right now it arrives at, I think, just past 8 o'clock, like 8:05. And so making those route adjustments to the L route and the W2 accordingly, and the Short Range Transit Plan recommends removing service from areas of low ridership. The W2 falls under a majority of that. And then we're picking up the locations along the W2 that do have high ridership with the L route or the W1. And then the W2 route can be combined with the L route to include the stops that the W2 was no longer servicing. So there are not going to be locations that don't have service within a quarter mile of its existing service. So there's not essentially, we're not eliminating services that currently exist. They're being absorbed by the other routes that are running around it. And so it's essentially providing a more efficient system for us. And the L route service reductions, this is also what we implemented in the fall. It's streamlining based on Short Range Transit Plan recommendations, providing a bi-directional travel, adding services in South Livingston. There's been a lot of development on the south side of 99 over to the market, so down Main Street and taking a right. Essentially, if you're traveling westbound, you're taking a right and servicing that whole development. I'll get to the map in a second. Forgive my poor description of that, but trying to have more coverage area in Livingston and increase ridership, and doing a lot more of the left turns that I've talked about are unsafe, as well as incorporating stops from the eliminated W2, as I just mentioned, and scheduling to incorporate route modifications based on the Short Range Transit Plan recommendations. And so this would also, with time, include the elimination of flag stops where feasible. So we'd have to work with the city of Livingston to make sure that we've identified all the locations for bus stops. And then once we have bus stops no more than a quarter mile apart, we would then eliminate the flag stops. So you can see our current travel. The map's a little hard to read. I don't know if this has a laser. I don't think it does. We basically just kind of went down Main Street, went by the high school and around in a counterclockwise manner. We're basically going to be going down Main Street, traveling to the right, still hitting a portion of that section, go back down to Main Street past the high school, and then we're going to be traveling further west. I can't see the road, Peach Avenue, and then essentially encompassing all of the, I'll point to for the people in the room, but we basically had service only this way, so we're providing all of this new service area and upwards to the market. So we're having more service area coverage, which can essentially provide more local transportation for Livingston. And then the Los Banos service reduction. So when we implemented the microtransit services back in May of 2021, we increased the frequency and consistency of the service. We have since identified that there is not the ridership to support and sustain that, and those resources. So we currently have 3 buses on the LB commuter. So this service reduction would change it to 2 buses, and rather than hour frequency, it would become an hour and a half frequency. And so you'd still have that consistent. We're still going to have the microtransit in Los Banos, in Dos Palos. You could transfer at the Y. This would reduce it from 3 buses to 2. And so, and then this is eliminating flag stops in all incorporated cities as they're identified, and as we can get the word out to passengers, we would like to do that to keep it safer for the bus operations. There's not plans to do that in the unincorporated cities, simply because there is no, central communal location for them to stop, and we want to make it as accessible as possible until we can figure out a different plan. So this is a summary of what the changes are. So we're going from 11 vehicles to 8 vehicles, and some of those reductions are currently in place, but we were able to do that under the CARES Act emergency notification or emergency reduction of service, but we have up to 1 year to implement those or reinstate them. And so this whole network change would do this in a seamless way. Passengers are used to a lot of the reductions that we're proposing, and then it would just make our system a lot more efficient by providing services to some of our more disadvantaged communities or locations throughout the communities, and give people more access to buses. So I know that was a lot of information, but does anybody have any questions about? Okay, so, sorry, next steps. So I'm asking today for approval to the changes, and then we would start on the 21st, the public hearing and comment period for input. So we would publish official schedules and ask people to comment on them. We would have updated maps, and we would notify everyone that routes are changing on July 21st at your next board meeting. We would hold a public hearing, and you guys could hear anyone who's submitting comments. We would give you a summary of all the comments submitted, provide revised schedule if required, and then we would implement them on August 13th. The goal of implementing on August 13th is to capture any new travel patterns that occur during people returning to school, having to take their kid to school before they go to work, making sure that we are kind of cognizant of that and not changing mid-semester, mid-term, or whatever. And so I think if we get the word out now as people are signing up for classes, we provide a lot of college-age transportation. We're able to give people a fair warning and heads up that we're going to be changing routes, seemingly for the better, but there could be something that we're missing that we'll get through the public comment process. So, the action before you is to recommend and approve the route schedule and service revisions, and direct us to provide a Title VI compliant outreach and public hearing prior to implementation.
All right. Any questions of Christine? No. What's the pleasure of the board?
Move to approve.
Okay.
Second.
Been moved by Director Nagy, seconded by Director Pedroso. I'll open up for a public comment. I see none in the House. There's none online. I'll close public comment. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Motion carries unanimously. Okay. I do have one comment. Is it possible to take a look at making up or getting some yard signs made that would have the paratransit and the paratransit phone number on it, and put them in the communities where we're reducing the bus travel? That way, if somebody sees the bus no longer traveling, they might see that here's a place I can call.
Yeah, we can look for some opportunities for advertising.
Okay.
Yard signage, maybe as public locations.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right.
Okay.
Thank you.
No problem.
Okay, we'll move to the Merced County Association of Governments. Item 14 is our action items. 14A is to authorize the executive director to enter into a contract for regional non-motorized transportation plan in the amount of $236,380 for a total of 2 years with Fair Peers. I'll turn it over. Oh, hi, Natalia. I'll turn it over to you.
Thank you, Mr. Chair and members of the board. I am very pleased to bring this item before you. As you know, the main policy goals for our agency is to reduce greenhouse gases and vehicle miles traveled. And one of the ways that we do that is to encourage people to walk and bike more and get out of their cars. But that's easier said than done in some of the communities throughout the county, because some of them don't have the facilities to be able to do that in a safe way. And so that is why this plan is so important, because this plan will do a thorough needs assessment for every city and community. It'll see where there are gaps, and then identify smart strategies to address those needs that are identified in the plan. And this will be particularly useful for those cities that have outdated bicycle or pedestrian plans, because now they'll have something that's current to help them be competitive when they're applying for funding for those projects that have been identified. They'll also have a clear roadmap to help guide the use of Measure V funds for the alternative mode projects. And all in all, when this is completed, this will be just a valuable tool, to help us to get the sustainable, healthy communities that we envision for our region. And so in the staff report, you can see the details of the procurement process. We received 4 proposals, and in the end, Fair and Pierce scored the highest. So if there aren't any questions, we are requesting that you authorize the executive director to enter into a 2-year contract for a regional non-motorized transportation plan in the amount of $236,380 with the selected vendor, Fair and Pierce. But if you have any questions, I'll try to answer them.
Okay, thank you. Any questions? No? Now, the 236,380, that's a not to exceed number, correct? I see.
I believe so.
Yeah, okay.
Yes. Yes.
Thank you. All right, pleasure of the board. Anybody think this is a good idea?
Chair Silvera, motion to approve item 14A.
Second.
Okay, I have a motion by Director Silvera, a second by Director Kale. Open up for public comment. None online. I'll go ahead and call for the vote. All those in favor signify by saying aye. 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 Any opposed? Motion carries unanimously.
Thank you.
No, thank you. We'll move to item B, which is approve MCAG's other programs budget for the fiscal year 22-23, and we have Nav Bagri.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Can you guys hear me?
Yes. You can take it down if you'd like.
All right, thank you. As our CAC member said, we do a lot in the house. There's a lot of things that we do. This other programs are on top of our transportation planning stuff that we do. So for TJPA, RWA, and YARTS, MCAG provides staffing and members management oversight for these JPAs. These services are pass-through cost for salaries, benefits, and other fringes. Each of the JPA's governing body has approved or is taking action on improving these pass-through costs. The other programs that MCAG does is Finish the 99, which is advocacy to finish the 99 widening segments. We also do the One Voice program, advocacy program, which advocates for federal and state projects in Merced County. This year's budget includes also a state portion of it, which will be targeting transportation planning items. We also do the abandonment vehicle abatement program, which administers the funds from the vehicle registration fee that allocates to a jurisdiction to help them abate the vehicles. We also do the SAFE, which we talked about last month, what the SAFE program is. This budget will also include a study to help how we can spend those funds down. Overall, for fiscal year 22-23, the budget salary increased by $646,000. Other increases associated with salaries, benefits, and potential merit increases, COLA, health benefits, retirement contributions, anticipated overtime for RW staff, and 1 new position for RWA. The service and supplies increased by $18,000. That's in part to the SAFE study and also the One Voice potential policy, which Mary Michael will be talking about next. Like I said, overall, the budget increased by $664,000. 97% was pass-through costs for salaries. So any questions?
Any questions of Nav? Wow, quiet group today.
Chair Silvera, motion to approve NAV's all other budget.
Second.
Okay, been moved by Director Silvera, seconded by Director Pedroso. I'll open up for public comment. Is there any online? Seeing none online, I'll call for the vote. All those in favor signify by saying aye. 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 Any opposed, same sign. Motion carries unanimously. Moved to item C, which is procure state transportation lobbying services. I'll turn it over to Mary Michael Rawlings. Hi.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chair, members of the board. Mary Michael Rawling, Public Affairs Manager. Maybe you're saving all your questions for me. I'm not sure.
It's lighting up over here, so I think you're right.
But thank you for the passage of the other. Oh, you just want me to stop now. Okay, I get it. So as you saw in that budget, Element 550 incorporates all of the legislative advocacy work done by MCAG, which is primarily the federal One Voice program, but also includes lots of work through the Valley Voice and also the Finish the 99 coalition done that has just started recently. We're bringing this item before you today because we are at a juncture where we will be going out to bid for our federal lobbying services contract. Right now, essentially, we're starting to put all those documents together. The contract with Townsend was approved and started in 2017. We've exercised all our options, and it's just that time. However, because of the activities of the last few years and the increase in work that the agency as a whole has undergone on the state level in these various different ways, we wanted to come to the board to ask for your approval to augment that contract going forward to incorporate state lobbying services and support. There are a number of new programs and funding available at the state level. Policies are changing, and lack of support from a lobbyist at the state level really undermines the agency's ability to be timely in terms of connecting to state level agencies and policymakers when decisions are being made or when funding is available. In addition, as those of you who are involved in the One Voice program know, we're often told by the folks in DC when we go that we really need to connect with our regional, the federal folks at the regional level, or that federal programs are being implemented by the state, their state counterparts, or that federal funding is flowing through state agencies. So it's really important for us to be more engaged at that state level. So for all of those reasons, we really wanted to come to you before we start this RFP process to see if there's the willingness of the board to incorporate those services in this contract. The contract will come back to you for final approval when it's done, but one of the other reasons that we wanted to have this discussion early on is in full transparency, because we anticipate the cost of the contract going up, not just because it's been 5 years since we've gone out to bid, but also this is going to be a whole nother level of service. And the contract is funded fully by member dues. So we do fully anticipate having to come back for approval to increase the member dues of all the member agencies. We don't know what that cost will be or what that will break down into, but we do not anticipate coming back to the board for an augmentation in member dues this fiscal year. We will come back next fiscal year. Because we did not go to DC for 2 years, we do have some carryover funds to get us through the first part of this contract, which we anticipate starting January 1st. So I'll stop there. I'm happy to answer any questions you have about any of that information. Otherwise, as I mentioned, the action before you today is to direct staff to continue with the procurement of state transportation lobbying services in addition to federal lobbying services. Thank you.
Any questions of Mary Michael? Oh, you guys want to play? Oh, yep. Go ahead, Director Silvera.
Thank you. So Mary Michael, sorry about that. So this would be to do an RFP for all new procurement. This wouldn't be, I'm really happy with the job that Townsend does, and I get it. We fall under certain rules, and after so long, we have to go out to an RFP. But seeing as how we really didn't do anything for 2 years, I would think we would be able to just extend them by a couple years and then just bring them on board. I know that they offer state lobbying services, and it would make sense to me, however we move forward, that we're not looking at two different firms. I don't know that I would be in support of looking at one federal firm and one state firm. I think you duplicate a lot of services there, to where if you had a firm that was kind of handling both of them for us, would make more sense. So just maybe some comments on that from you, and then also just, you know, looking at the examples on page 276, you know, there's increased costs that are going to come along with it, and so I appreciate you bringing it to everybody's attention, just kind of putting it out there, what's going on kind of valley-wide, that there's potential increases coming down the road to the membership dues if we want to continue to have this type of level of state and federal support. That's all I have, Chair. Thank you.
Okay. Director Nagy?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. My question was the same as Scott's. If this was going to be two different entities, one state and one federal, because I think we would be better served with one company also. And I know that you're exactly right. When we've gone back to Washington, they've always said, well, this is administered through the state agency or through our person at Sacramento or whatever. So I think we're right on, and I think it's an area that where we've been missing the boat. So the state's got a lot of extra money, and we need to have somebody there watching out for us.
Yeah. Thank you. Stacy?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. To the question about the RFP structuring, I appreciate those comments. We had talked about, and when MCAG used to have state services before my time, the RFP typically would be structured to where a firm could bid on either or both. And ideally, you can get a firm that does both, but there are quite a few state services, state lobbying services that don't provide federal and vice versa. So typically that's what we would do is structure it to where you would capture the whole universe of possibilities. It's also helpful in price comparison when you're having someone bid just on a state or just on federal, to kind of have that to wager. But I mean, there are a lot of efficiencies if you're able to capture a firm that does both. To the question of being able to extend Townsend, what's that? Yeah. Well, I believe we had a 3-year contract to 1-year extension options. I'm looking at Alicia. She's shaking her head. She's our procurement expert, that we would have to go out to procure a new contract. Of course, we would make sure our incumbent would be aware of that solicitation to bid.
Okay. At this time, I'm going to go back to discussion mode. All right, so if you want to speak, then you're live. You don't have to request to speak. All right.
I want to say something. I had a conversation with Stacy this afternoon about this, and I understand that we have to go back out to bid, but I think we're doing something that's really needed, like Director Nagy said, that we really need to have that state level, and I think having everything under one umbrella, under one company who's really worked really hard for us and has been very responsive and answers all of our questions, and they're there. I understand it's a competitive process, but I think it would be easier knowing that they know our issues and everything. And I'm sure, you know, when we go and we talk to whomever it is, if they get a federal and then they get, you know, if we include them with the state, there will be, I'm sure they'd be willing to negotiate something of a deal to do both. But I mean, I think we're getting a heck of a deal now. And I think that eventually we're going to have to pay more, so.
Okay. Anyone else? Is that in the form of a motion?
I will make that motion.
All right. Is there a second?
Second.
Been moved by Director Pedroso, seconded by Director Nagy, to go out to procure straight transportation lobbying services. I'll open up for public comment. None online. I'll close public comment. All those in favor signify by saying aye. 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 Any opposed? Motion carries unanimously. Thank you. Move to item 14D, which is authorization of the executive director to enter into a contract for a regional housing trust fund administration and finance study and housing consortium framework in the amount of $89,000 with RSG Incorporated. Stacy.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. In March of this year, the Governing Board approved a recommendation from the Regional Early Action Planning Group, or the REAP work group, to utilize some of the agency's REAP 1 funds to study how a regional housing trust fund could be established and funded in Merced County. The REAP work group recently recommended expanding that scope to include the exploration of a housing consortium model as well. So staff at this time is proposing a contract with RSG. It is a sole source contract, and I can explain a little more on that in a bit, in the amount of $89,000 to complete this work over the next 6 months. So the REAP work group, comprised of representatives of each of the jurisdictions, has reviewed this proposed scope of work and the contract cost. I do want to, in the spirit of transparency, share that this did not go through the formal TRB agenda process because we were still with the jurisdictions negotiating the final contract scope of work and cost, but it has been shared with the TRB as information via email, but many of those TRB members were actually also part of the REAP work group or the senior staff. The reason for putting it on this agenda and not July is simply we are in the 1-year countdown of the expenditure of the REAP funds. This is a kind of a step 1 of exploring the possibility of a housing consortium and or a regional housing trust fund. So we're trying to be expeditious in getting these contracts underway so that the work can be completed. I did mention that it's a sole source. That's typically not something that we talk about at this level, but I do want to point out that across the state, because of this influx of funding from the state on addressing the housing crisis, our pool of housing consultants are just stretched very, very thin. We have a bench of 10 firms that are on call through the Valley procurement, through Fresno COG, that we can utilize, and we have repeatedly been told they just don't have capacity to help. And then also we have colleagues in the Valley who have gone through, some of the larger COGs have gone through the formal procurement process only to not receive proposals or have to extend or have to modify. And so I do have the flexibility or the ability in the situations where we've deemed that there isn't competition for this type of work, that we can do a sole source, and that is what I'm proposing today. So this would be REAP 1 funding. It is for a purpose that the board has previously authorized. We have about $240,000 authorized by the board for this purpose, and this particular contract to explore these two tools is in a requested amount of $89,000.
Okay, thank you, Stacy. Any questions of Stacy?
Mr. Chair, Stacy, where did you find them? If there was none to be found, where did you find these?
So what we ended up doing is working with the jurisdictions and say, who are you working with, and do you have anyone who can take on this work? And this came through the city of Merced.
Thank you. Chair, if there are no other, go ahead, Pat.
Stacy, is the 89,000 coming out of the 240?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Director Silvera?
Chair, if there are no further questions, motion to approve item 14D.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion by Director Silvera, a second by Director Pedroso. I'll open up for public comment. None online. I will close public comment. All those in favor signify by saying aye. 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 Any opposed? Motion carries unanimously. We do have 2 discussion items. 15A. It's a presentation on the proposed 6th cycle regional housing needs allocation methodology. Natalia and Cascadia.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Oh, hold on. Let me get you a little louder.
All right, thank you. All right, thank you, Mr. Chair, members of the board. I won't be speaking much, but I am just here to introduce our consultants, Cascadia Partners. We have Paul Wrench here and Rachel Cotton, and they will be briefing you today on our regional housing needs allocation, or RHNA process, what we've been doing up to date, and also get you up to speed on what the proposed methodology will be. And so I'll let them, without further ado, I'll let them take it away.
Good afternoon to everybody, the chair and the directors. My name is Paul Runge. I'm with Cascadia Partners, with a consultant team assisting MCAG with the RHNA process. I'm joined by my colleague, Rachel. Do you want to say hi, Rachel?
Good afternoon, everyone.
Great. We've been working with Ms. Halia and steering committee members on the steering committee that you authorized, I think in January, folks like John Chuckley, who from earlier today. Those city staff and those managers have been helping guide the RHNA process through that steering committee, and we want to report out today on all the progress that we've made. I'll try to keep this high level and brief. I heard that there's a dinner coming up that folks have to get to. I don't want to get between folks and their dinner. And so we'll try to just breeze through this. The TRB was updated with the same information last week, so they have the same context that you're getting today. So we just want to provide that background on what's been accomplished and what the next steps are. So a bit of context that I'll go through really quickly is on the housing market. This chart shows housing price growth over the last, this was in 2021, so this was the data when we started the RHNA process. Of no surprise to folks, housing prices are way, way up. And that really hurts people in their wallets. And so that process, might be changing, or that problem might be changing as interest rates change, but certainly folks are really feeling it when it comes to housing costs. The housing market in Merced County in particular also exhibits low vacancy, and that puts lots of upward pressure on home prices and on rents. So the state has processes for dealing with this. RHNA is one of them. I'm sure many or some of you are familiar with RHNA, but the RHNA process essentially unfolds through the state assigning housing need to the region, and then the region has to come up with a method for divvying up that among all the jurisdictions. So we do that in line with some state guidance, these 5 objectives, which I won't read in full, but they are to increase the housing supply and the mix of housing types, to promote infill, equity, and environment, to ensure jobs housing balance, to promote regional income parity, and to affirmatively further fair housing. Our methodology for divvying up the assigned housing need needs to further all of these objectives, which means they need to be taken into account in the methodology itself, and the outcomes must be representative of these 5 objectives. So we really have to keep our eye on the ball here, and that's what the steering committee and your staff members have been focused on over the last now 5 months. So we start with what the state has assigned the region to do. That's this regional determination of need. It is 23,000 housing units. That is what the jurisdictions collectively are responsible for zoning for through the RHNA process, or I guess through the housing element process, but RHNA being the first step. That's an increase from last cycle. Last cycle, which started in 2014, had about 16,000 housing units were assigned by the state to the region to zone for. So that's a 40% jump, which I think is a concern for jurisdictions. You are not alone as a region in receiving a higher determination. Throughout the Central Valley, and especially in the coastal large metropolises, larger determinations of need are being handed down from the state, which is essentially them saying, you need to zone for more housing. That's sort of the RHNA process kicks off all of that rezoning. So it's not a mandate to construct. Jurisdictions can't control, fully the amount of construction that occurs there, but it is a mandate to zone for a certain capacity. So what's our process? We get this determination of need, and then we have to come up with a methodology. That's this gray box in the middle. So we take the steering committee, we take input from the public, we get consultation from HCD at the state, and we try to come up with a methodology, a data-informed way of divvying up this housing need among the jurisdictions. That's what I'm going to talk to you about today. Eventually, we will seek HCD approval for that, sort of towards the end of summer. They'll do a formal review, and then we'll document it all up in a plan, the regional housing needs plan. That's the orange square on the right, and that sort of puts in place each of the numbers of housing units that jurisdictions need to plan for in their housing elements or in a collective regional housing element, if that's the way that the Merced region decides to approach its housing plan. So where are we in the project schedule? You gave approval to the steering committee, I think in either January or February. So we've been having meetings with them since then. And we've narrowed down a set of options that further those objectives down to a recommended option. Right now, we're documenting all of that into a memo, which then can be released for public comment. And then we'll have a public hearing on that at the next governing board meeting. So we'll see you again. And we'll bring that back and be able to hear from the public or any leaders of organizations who want to register a comment on what the steering committee has come up with. And then that'll go to HCD review, and we'll come back to you in August to seek full approval after having received that comment and received some informal comments from HCD as well. And then, like I mentioned, we'll head into creating a regional housing needs plan towards the end of the year, and then straight into housing elements. Okay, so now time to back up. We've been talking about divvying up housing need, but what exactly is arena methodology? What does that mean? And what does it look like? So there are lots of ways to do this, but a typical way to do it, which we've adopted, is to start with essentially a baseline allocation of housing need among the jurisdictions, and then make adjustments from there based on data. So in the little picture on the left, we have the full housing need in that gray circle. It's being divided among the jurisdictions into those green circles. We're doing that based on baseline data from the last RTP, which was available sort of at the outset of the RENA process. Unfortunately, the 2022 RENA RTP wasn't set in place at that time. But we're taking the 2018 RTP household allocation and using that as our starting place. Essentially, the most recent completed regional planning effort related to housing is where we start. From there, we have those green circles, but now we can make adjustments to the size of those green circles in order to change which jurisdictions get more housing needs and which jurisdiction gets less. And we do that justified on a basis of data, which we call adjustment factors. So a really simple one might be jobs access. If a place has really great jobs access, that would be a justification for increasing the amount of housing need assigned to that particular place. And that would be in line with the jobs housing balance objective that the state has put forward in the statute, like discussed earlier. So the last step after we adjust the size of those circles is to change the makeup of the circles. So that's changing the income makeup. The RENA determination of need comes from the state with different income breakdowns. And so we can adjust which jurisdictions get more of the lower income housing need and which of the jurisdictions get more of the higher income housing need. And that is important because the lower income housing need, the below moderate income housing need, which is represented as the purple parts of these circles, that has to be zoned for at a higher density than the rest of it, because higher densities tend to be more financially feasible for the construction of affordable housing. And so that higher density is 20 development units an acre or more, which is about maybe a duplex on a 4,000 square foot lot. So that's why that's important. So that last step is using adjustment factors to determine how much of the circle is sort of above moderate income and how much of it is that purple, the below moderate income. 3 steps. We also, in addition to meeting the requirements laid out in the objectives, the RENA objectives, we have to keep in alignment with the RTP SCS. We can't just ignore what the other hand is doing. So we have, throughout this process, tried to stay in strong alignment with the RTP team and all of the work that your staffs are doing around that. So we've done some combined outreach with the RTP team in the form of a survey as well as a shared public workshop. You're seeing the results of one of the survey questions there. We've also tried to build into the RENA methods the same themes that we're hearing coming up in the RTP SCS conversations. So in the preferred RTP scenario, there was an emphasis on increased access to transit, in the preferred scenario, increased multifamily housing as sort of a housing typology in that preferred scenario, and there was an emphasis on preserving farmland. So all of those themes sort of show up in our selected RENA methodology. And like I mentioned earlier, the 2018 RTP SCS, which is sort of where this 2022 RTP started off, that's the basis too of our RENA this time, our baseline housing allocation. So like I've been mentioning, the steering committee has been working, has had these 5 meetings to narrow down to a recommended methodology. And so we can discuss it now. There were 6 options that we were looking at. I'm not going to go through them all, but we'll focus on 1C, which is the recommended methodology. I mentioned earlier that there are adjustment factors that we use to raise or lower the housing need allocation in a particular jurisdiction on a basis of justification of whatever data we're seeing. And so the 5 squares that are in that yellow rectangle, that yellow highlight, those are all of the adjustment factors that were included. Essentially, those are all the data points that we took into account on top of the 2018 RTP's housing allocation in order to adjust where housing need is assigned. So in 1C, we have an adjustment for high quality agricultural land using the Department of Conservation's data set on farmland quality. The goal here is to assign more housing need in places that have less high quality agricultural land. There's a lot of high quality agricultural land in the region, but the areas that have less of it potentially have more land that's suitable to conversion to housing. So that's why that adjustment factor is there, and that's in line with sort of some of the RTP themes that I brought up earlier. Jobs housing balance is another adjustment factor. We're looking to add more housing to places with lots of jobs, but maybe not as much housing. Percent in poverty, so the poverty rate in a place was taken into account. We wanted to add more higher income housing need in places that have more poverty. One of the objectives that I listed earlier is regional income parity, breaking down enclaves of wealth and poverty. And so having this adjustment factor serves to address that. Below that is access to opportunity. The state uses the tax credit allocations opportunity index data in order to assess whether a place sort of offers high opportunities to low-income families or lower opportunities. So what we've done is we've looked at which cities have neighborhoods that tend to rate as high opportunity neighborhoods for low-income families, and we've tried to assign more of that lower income housing need to those places where they're most likely to succeed. The state also has, this is how they assign or allocate affordable housing funding. So it's very good for us to include this. We increase the likelihood that the region can get those sorts of projects funded. And the last factor is increasing transit access, which is in line with one of the sort of highlights of the most recent RTP scenario, preferred scenario. One of the reasons why we chose option 1C is because it tended to perform very well on all the different ways that we were looking at this, or that your teams were looking at this. So not only RTP alignment, but how well it aligned with the state statutory direction and HCD's direction, how well it aligned with the public sentiment that we got back from that survey, and how well it acknowledged and worked with some of the water issues that we, and infrastructure issues that we know to be present in the region. Option 1C, essentially, its thesis is it tries to allocate housing need in places where there's less high quality farmland and more jobs access. And it tries to add more below moderate income housing in lower poverty and higher opportunity areas with good access to transit. Essentially, this results in increased allocations in Merced, Atwater, and Livingston along the 99 corridor, and decreased allocations to the unincorporated area in the West Side communities. It adds more lower income RENA into Atwater and Livingston, which both score really well on that tax credit allocation committee opportunity index, so making it more likely for affordable housing funding to flow to those places. This was a unanimous recommendation from the steering committee. John, who spoke to us earlier, John Checkley, who spoke to us earlier, brought up the great point that keeping more below moderate income housing in Merced than some of the other options, that was a really good way to make sure that homeless folks with, who aren't necessarily homeless, but folks with a lot of service needs have access to housing sort of at their price point. So the next steps going into the summer, and then I will be done. We are going to release that methodology memorandum reviewing sort of everything in its gritty details related to this proposed methodology. We'll come back to you in July for public comment and a public hearing on that. And HCD will, in the meantime, conduct an informal review. We'll have that public hearing, and then we'll move into August where HCD will begin a formal approval, and we will we'll come back to the governing board for your approval of that methodology, with you having the chance to have heard the public comment in July. So that's the next couple months coming up with RENA. Does anybody have any questions? I know that was quite a lot of information.
Yep, Director Silvera.
Just one quick question is, go back to the very front of your slide presentation when you talked about the previous cycle numbers to the current cycle's numbers. So when I look at that 22,620, does that take into, because you read down there, that leaves 12,247 to be added before December of 2023. So does that add that, and that's how you get to the 22,000, or you still are on the hook for the 12,247, and in the next, what is it, 10 years, you got to add an additional 22 on top of that?
Great question. It's not additive, but so the way that 23,000 number is determined is based on the state looks at your population forecast, and it looks at the Department of Finance's population forecast. Oftentimes they're very similar. They're supposed to be very similar. But they can differ. They look at both of those, and then they look at some indicators related to the housing market. How many people are cost burdened? How many folks are in overcrowded situations? Whether there are any housing units, specifically affordable housing units, lost to disasters. Whether there's a lot of demolition. Trying to think if I missed any. Oh, what the vacancy rate is. They use all of that. They sort of put it through a calculator, and that spits out this 23,000 housing units. It is not taking the previous allocation and whatever wasn't built and adding it on top. However, the theory is, if you're not building up to, close to the determination of need from the last cycle, you would expect those housing indicators to look bad, which makes the calculator spit out a higher number. Does that make sense?
Yeah, so to put it in layman's term, that's a new number that we have, our goal is to try to achieve, 22,620 when we get to 20.
That's a better way to put it. It's a new number.
Perfect. Thank you.
Anyone else? Nope. So I do want to ask one question, Paul. You mentioned somewhere in your presentation about funding to get those houses built.
Yes.
What did you mean by that?
So one of the factors that we included, it's the fourth one down. It's the access to opportunity factor. So we are essentially one of the objectives is to affirmatively further fair housing. The state government has, or HCD has interpreted that to mean whether or not the RENA allocation is providing access to high opportunity areas through its allocation. Is it making sure that low income people have an opportunity to live in neighborhoods with great schools, with great job opportunities, et cetera, places that researchers say would be conducive to low income families succeeding. So what we did is we took the data that they used to essentially figure out which areas are high opportunity, and we use that as an adjustment factor. And why that's important is because that's the same data that the state uses when it's deciding where to send tax credit, like equity opportunities for affordable housing developments. So when an affordable housing developer applies for tax credit equity, and that gets allocated out by the state, being in a place or having a site that's in a location that's in a high opportunity neighborhood, according to the state, serves them well for their application and makes them more likely to receive those dollars. So if we put a bunch of low income housing in areas that aren't high opportunity, the likelihood that this region is able to win those dollars from the state is diminished.
Okay. I mean, is Sacramento aware that it costs more money to build affordable housing than it does to build market rate housing?
I can't.
That's a rhetorical question. You know, I have 56,000 bosses in my district. About 6,000 of them live in the city of Gustine. The balance live in unincorporated areas. And Delhi and Livingston both have over 11,000 people living there. And so I worked with our county planning department to try to bring affordable housing builders in to do affordable housing. And in two cases, the developers really didn't give me feedback other than no way. But one of them was a friend of mine, and he sat down and explained, you know, just the brokenness of the system. And so, you know, we've got an affordable housing project kind of going here, and I believe the cost is $400,000 per unit to build it. You can build a house for about $225,000. And anyway, so if you could share that upstream, I'd appreciate it. Any other questions?
I have one, Mr. Chair.
Yes.
I guess, I don't know if this is the same question or not, but I think I heard you say something about building affordable housing for low-income people and having higher-paying jobs in the areas where they live. Could you explain to me how that calculation came about, or whose idea that was? Because I don't generally see that, where you have those two formulas mixing together, or that they happen. I mean, it would be wonderful, but I've never seen that happen where you have low-income housing and then you have some sort of livable wage jobs coming to those areas.
Yeah, of course. I might have misspoken or just not have been clear. The data that's being referred to in the fourth cell down in this table, the access to opportunity data, that comes from the state. And the state, essentially, all it is it's census tracts, like neighborhoods. And the state has labeled them high opportunity, moderate opportunity, or low opportunity. And the state is doing that on the back of some research that they've done. And that research says that these areas that they're ranking as high opportunity are areas that they think low-income families are likely to succeed economically if they are to be there. So it doesn't necessarily mean that there's like job matching or anything like that. I just meant to say that the state is really keen on us using this data set, not only because it uses it in the tax credit allocation, but just because it's helping us push more lower income housing need into areas that the state believes that people will succeed economically.
All right, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, any other questions? All right, thank you, Paul. I don't see any other questions in the House.
Thank you very much. Appreciate it.
All right, we'll move to item 15B, which is presentation of final Merced County short-range transit plan for 22 through 27. Christine Chavez. Thanks, Natalia.
Good afternoon again. So this is actually the draft short-range transit plan.
Oh, sorry about that.
No,
It says final on my agenda, but we'll just change that to draft.
So we wanted to present, we've been developing the short-range transit plan over the past few months, and we have done a number of outreach to make sure that we've fully vetted through the community. The short-range transit plan is done every 5 years. It's required by FTA for us to do it to essentially provide direction for the services that we provide at Transit Joint Powers Authority. So the short-range transit plan would be released starting today, and we want to go through a 2-month comment period. So we would bring it back in August for a public hearing. And the short-range transit plan includes a number of elements, including a service evaluation, passenger surveys, public outreach. We had over 1,300 surveys returned to us during the survey period. We engaged the public to the best of our abilities. We had a project website. We conducted a number of on-board, in-person, and community surveys. We did social media updates and information. We held pop-up events at the Merced College, UC Merced, Los Banos Community Center, Merced, and Atwater Transpo locations. We had a number of engagement sessions, including stakeholder advisory committee, consisting of local jurisdictions and nonprofits. We also included decision makers for jurisdictions, and we had listening sessions for the bus's fixed route operators to provide us feedback on what they hear on a daily basis when they're driving the buses, and just learned a little more about what is and what is not working on the current system. So the draft plan includes guiding principles and goals to maximize ridership, enhance customer experience, and ensure system efficiency and sustainability. It spells out service standards, which include everything from on-time performance, recommending annual system evaluations, looking at cost per revenue hour, number of passengers per revenue hour, frequency, new services needed to new developments, and then the type of services that are needed. So that there were a few recommendations for microtransit service in some of our more tweenerville communities. So not completely urban, but not completely rural. And then it did set standards and goals for us to have number of customers per revenue hour. There is a pretty substantial discussion on the UC Merced service coordination and consolidation. They do provide us with two scenarios, one completely assuming the UC Merced cat tracks, which is scenario 2, and then scenario 1 just assuming a lot more coordination on our schedule so that there's not as much overlap and we're able to get people as far as get UC Merced students as far as they can on public transit in coordination with cat tracks. There are financial considerations, including a capital plan and an outline for potential funding sources available to TJPA. A bus electrification plan, some recommendations for our bus electrification plan, which is a requirement by the ICT. In the Innovative Clean Transit, sorry for that, a regulation brought on by California Air Resources Board and due July 1st of 2023. There's recommendations for bus stops, including the agency agreements I discussed earlier, the elimination of some flag stops, an evaluation of our fare policy recommendations, nothing too substantial other than fare collection methods, which is essentially some tap passes and just various credit card uses, including, and then as well as classification of passes, so perhaps separating out our intercity and local monthly passes so that the locals aren't paying as much as the intercity, or intercities are paying more because they're riding further. And then a pretty substantial marketing plan evaluation, just ways that we can reach out to some target populations or share information in different manners based on some of the feedback that we received through the public comment process. So the draft plan is posted on the website and available for public comment. It's on mcagov.org/2022 SRTP. The adoption would come before or come after the public hearing. We would also bring back any comments that have been received to date. And then we would work to implement the rest of the recommendations over the next 5 years. And so with this reduction, we would just evaluate our resources and see how we can continue to move forward to a more sustainable transit system for Merced County. So that's a brief summary of what is in the plan. And so any questions or further discussion on that?
Any questions? I guess you were thorough. Okay. Thank you for the update. Okay, we'll move to Merced County Regional Waste Management Authority. And our first item is 16A, action item. Adopt operating capital and fleet final budget fiscal year 22-23, and we have Nav Bagri to thank for this information.
Well, I can't compete with Rena and short range transit plan, but I know Eric is very eager to do their budget.
I know.
So I'll let him do it.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Nav. So I've got about a 30-minute presentation.
Sir, we're going to take a 5-minute break, and then we'll be back.
Bring that back.
So Total joke, total jest.
I know.
This is the final budget for RWA. We brought to you the draft budget last month. There are no changes from the draft budget to what we're presenting to you today. I'm going to highlight 3 things that you need to be just touch on. One, we're proposing revenues at $16.3 million. Operating expenses, we're proposing $11.8 million. The operating expenses include one additional position, which is a heavy equipment mechanic that will go at the Billy Wright landfill. So positive cash flow of $26,000 for our operating cash. Our capital improvements project budget, we are proposing really only $100,000 in requests. We're really making use of money that we've got moving around through other CIP projects. If you remember, mid-year last year, we came through and we asked for $3.9 million to construct the Billy Wright landfill cell 2C, and that kind of took some of the revenues that we were looking at in this year. So we're not adding more money, but one of the big projects is the master plan. Which is the new admin building, the maintenance building, and the infrastructure relocation and move at Highway 59. My predecessor began this project, and so we'd like to bring this back in coming meetings just to bring you that master plan and kind of retouch on that project. So just know that will be coming back. The fleet budget. We are putting 2 pieces of equipment in the fleet budget, a dozer and a compactor. We just this week received our dozer that we ordered from last year's budget. So it took us about 12 months to get it from last year. We're expecting this to be about a 16 to 18 month process going forward. So we've got 2 pieces. We really need them. We've actually had to borrow one of our dozers from the Billy Wright site. We'll be returning that back since now that we have our new dozer. That concludes my presentation. Happy to answer any questions.
All right, thank you. Any questions of Eric? No? All right, it's an action item. What's the pleasure of the board?
Move to approve. Second.
We have a motion by Director Nagy and a second by Director Serrato. I'll open up for public comment. Is there none online, none in the House? I'll close public comment. All those in favor signify by saying aye. 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 Any opposed? Motion carries unanimously. Congratulations.
Thank you.
All right, you might as well stay there, huh? Item 17A is our SB 1383. Anyways, go ahead.
This is the 30-minute conversation. So just a quick update. We just completed our site tours to the 2 bidders that we received, and we're now interviewing those bidders. We've had 1 bidder interviewed. We'll go forward with another bidder interview. The steering committee is made up of the City of Merced, the County of Merced, Livingston, and Atwater. And so we are getting ready to conclude our interviews. We'll get then into negotiations, and we do plan, just a reminder, we do plan to have a session in front of the TRB to get the recommendation of the steering committee, and then an opportunity at which we can use the consultant and come into the jurisdictions, councils, and boardrooms to give them the information that the steering committee has recommended. So before we come back to the board, we do plan to have some of those things covered. So just a heads up, this is just an informational item or an opportunity to discuss rather. Our timeline right now, we think we will be back in front of you by August to give you some sort of update. Happy to answer any questions or open it up for discussion.
Sure. Any questions from the board?
My mom taught me if I don't have anything nice to say, don't say anything.
Yeah, I know. Well, your 30 minutes is up, sir.
Well, thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you.
If I may, one praise report. I just got a text from my wife. Last 2 weeks, she's been dealing with a kidney stone, and she just informed me that it's gone somewhere. She doesn't know where, but
it doesn't hurt, huh?
But so glory to God. I know my friends have been praying, my coworkers have been praying. I just wanted to share that. So.
Congratulations. All right, we'll move to item 18, Executive Director's Report. Stacy?
I was waiting for Eric to yield the remainder of his time to the executive director so I could have the other 25 minutes. But I do have a couple quick things, I promise. One, I just want to thank Mr. Chairman for his excellent service as chairperson over the last year. It's been a pleasure working with you, and I do look forward to working with our incoming chairperson, Director Serrato, here moving forward. So thank you very much. I sent an email, but I'm really excited to share that we will have a new director of transportation planning and programming on board as of July 11th. Her name is Elizabeth Forte. Some of you involved with our valley-wide activities have met her with our Highway 99 and other projects. She has a wealth of experience. She's been working in that interagency agreement that the board has approved several months ago with TCAG after when we experienced the vacancy in the department. So our planning team has been working with her and her colleagues, and so we're just really thrilled and really fortunate to bring her on board with her experience. So she will, you'll be able to meet her at the July board meeting. I also want to just mention that if you'll recall, several months ago, we initiated the JPA renewal process, and that opportunity to provide comments to legal counsel is coming up. That deadline is July 6th. So just as a reminder, I've been sharing the reminders at the staff level, but just as a reminder that that deadline is coming up on July 6th. So you'll hear more from counsel and myself as that date comes and goes. So I'm sure we'll have an update at some point, at least orally in July, and then we'll know where we're going from there. The third thing is you've heard a lot of reference to our 2022 RTPSES. I just want to note that the draft 2022 RTPSES is now available for review. The public comment period started on June 10th. It ends on August 4th. You'll have a presentation and a public hearing on that document at your July 21st board meeting. The document is available at mcagov.org and in hard copy at our office on 18th and K. Also under public review is our draft FTIP, which is as of June 10th, as well as the draft EIR to our RTPSES. Those public review periods will end on the 4th as well as our draft air quality conformity document for both the FTIP and the RTP. All of the public comment periods will end in August 4th. So all of our acronym alphabet soup of planning documents on our website under public review. You'll have a public hearing at the July board meeting. And then lastly, just have a happy and safe Independence Day.
All right, thank you. I'll do director's reports. I'll start on my right. If you have something, you're welcome to chime in. Otherwise, just say pass. Pass. He said pass.
Oh, pass.
Pass.
Puff, puff, pass.
Go ahead, Deborah. I'm sorry for that.
I'll say something. I'd like to just make this announcement. It's a by invitation event, but I wanted to share it, that the Federal Bureau of Reclamation is celebrating its 120th year anniversary, and there will be an event held at the Kennedy Hill, which is where the B.F. Siskiyou Dam is located, and also where President Kennedy, John F. Kennedy, broke ground 60 years ago for the dam in our area. So I'm excited about that, and along with that, there's going to be some additional work on the dam to raise the levels, and this is sort of like a groundbreaking ceremony for that.
Okay,
thank you.
Is there going to be a raffle for an elk tag during the ceremony?
I'll check on that.
Okay. April?
Thank you.
Good. Josh, anything?
Yeah, I just wanted to mention, I know I was gone the last couple of meetings, and Stacy mentioned our One Voice trip and the meeting with the White House and how it was brought back up at the NACO Western Interregional Conference with the person we met with from the White House. So if anybody doubts that these trips make a difference, they're mistaken, because they used us as really an example of how things should be done and something that they should follow, the other counties and stuff. And this was a county from, which is weird, the Midwest, even though it's the Western region, but it was a county from the Midwest, and they said, well, follow the Merced County Association of Government model and do it that way. So it is really working. So thank you for mentioning that.
Chair-elect?
Lloyd, I just want to thank you for your year of service. You did a great job. I think really everything, all the, not quite horror stories, but all the things we heard about this board, and everything was the exact opposite with you at the helm. Everything was smooth, easy. So I just wanted to thank you for your work. And if anybody is, on behalf of, this is different, on behalf of the district attorney's office, anybody's hanging out later on with Director Nagy, there's potential criminal liability that could result from, just be smart, be safe. That's all. That's
All
true.
right.
That's yeah.
Okay. So I don't have too much to add, but I do have one thing. So Eric and Stacy, as you are working with the TRB on SB 1383, please bring up the topic of possibly suing the state from an environmental standpoint, that they're going to cause more pollution by vehicles running around places, and it's going to increase the climate change. So, thank you.